4 cylinders, 4 carburetors, 750 cc's that make 67 horsepower. One of the first motorcycles to ever come with a disc brake in the front, and one of the most iconic, if not the most legendary motorcycle of all time. The Honda CB750. I know many of you love this bike as much as I do. This is one of my favorite bikes I have ever owned, and this is a bike that I probably will never live without in my collection. I own 4 of these, and it hurt if I sold any one of them. This is my 1976 CB750 in Antares Red. This is a K6. Today I want to talk about the Honda CB750 K model, why this bike is so iconic, what this bike is, what it represents, what it's like to ride, and just an overall review about this motorcycle. Because I made so many videos about things that I like, how it feels to ride, and all of these different things, and I thought, well, I've never made a proper review on the most iconic bike that I own. This bike cemented itself in history as one of the greats. This was the first ever superbike to come out because at the time in 1969, there was not a single bike that could hold a candle to this motorcycle. When it came out, it put itself in a completely different class from all the British and even Japanese bikes that were being made at the time. The CB750 was kind of the final nail and the biggest nail in the coffin of the British motorcycling industry for multiple reasons. Now, there were a lot of financial troubles going on in England at the time. They were making poor decisions, not selling bikes really well, and couldn't innovate like Honda could. The CB750 was like a massive hammer to the head when it came out because not a single motorcycle from any company could keep up with this bike. The 750 when it came out was cheaper, more reliable, and way faster than any of the British motorcycles, and there was almost no point in going out and buying one of those bikes. Everyone wanted the biggest and fastest machine like they do today, and this bike outshadowed all of the British bikes at the time. Now, of course, we love the old British bikes. They had this nostalgic feeling that not even the Hondas can deliver, but at the time, reliability, power were kind of the name of the game. Plus, talking financially, in the United States in the 70s, a lot of these old big muscle cars started to fail because of the fuel crisis. Good on fuel, more power, more reliable, and way cheaper. I mean, that just spelled success for Honda. When you see modern day motorcycles that look like this, just know, this was the first to ever do it. This was the bike that everyone wanted to copy. Everyone wanted a piece of Honda's success. A lot of Japanese manufacturers in years to follow, I don't want to say copied to this bike, but took a lot of influence from the 4-cylinder setup with the large displacement, with insane reliability. Honda had this very famous saying, and I might get this wrong, but these bikes were supposed to be able to live 100 hours at redline and still be able to balance a coin on them at idle. These bikes were an engineering feat at the time. They were so well balanced and so incredibly reliable that even today, these bikes still continue to live, and they've been tormented throughout the years. Now, this bike ran for almost 10 years, about 5 years after they killed off these motorcycles. There were just so many other bikes in the market at the time. The CBX had came out, Kawasaki's 6-cylinder had came out, the KZ1, KZ900, and so many other bikes and iconic bikes from the 80s. Keep in mind, this bike came out in the late 60s. It was introduced in 1968. They sold these bikes by the ton, but unfortunately, when the 80s and 90s rolled around, people really did not care about the original CB750. People abused these bikes, ran them into the ground, turned them into choppers. Yeah, people turned these into choppers. I don't know. But they also just wrecked them. But here's the thing, right? Name me any 90s bike that in 20 or 30 years is going to look as timeless as this motorcycle right here, run as well as these motorcycles do, parked years on end, carburetors cleaned, and fire right up. Now, of course, the modern 90s bikes are going to be objectively better, but let them age. These bikes are going to age gracefully. They have aged gracefully. That's one of the biggest things about these bikes is when you go to buy them, you can find a lot of rough examples, but without a ton of work, you can make those rough examples into something that is going to be timeless. These bikes have such an awesome function because you can still use these bikes like a modern day motorcycle. It'll still go on the highway. It'll still go cross country. Properly maintained bikes will not stop running. These things are amazing. There really just wasn't anything like it at the time. This bike set the precedent of what motorcycles should be. But with all of that being said, let's talk a little bit more about the bike, what makes it even more special, what it's like to ride more importantly, and have a little bit of fun with it. My bike does like to be a little finicky on the cold startup. The carbs do need to be adjusted just a little bit. So choke on, gas on, Turn it to run. It'll probably die in a second here, but it always starts up. Just takes a second sometimes. Of course, this time it wants to run flawlessly. Alright, let me go put on my helmet. Let's go hop on the bike and have some fun. We did a little bit of a cold start, but I'll show you guys how to start it. Ignition all the way down there. Choke is on the carburetor here. Fuel is right where any other fuel would be. And start. My bike likes to be revved out when it's cold. And let's get onto the road. I think I'm running out of gas, which is not good. Alright, so I think I'm running out of gas right now because I just turned the bike to reserve. My bike does unfortunately like to leak a little bit of gasoline now and then, and I thought I had fixed the issue, but it still every once in a while likes to do it. One of my floats is probably sticking. It's not the end of the world, but I do need to get gas before I go on this little ride here, because I'm actually going to drop the bike off. As you can hear right there, that's the sound of the indicators. A little beeping noise, if you can hear it over the Harley. I just love how smooth this bike is. I mean, like Honda says about balancing a coin after X amount of hours at Redline, this bike is absolutely just brilliant. I mean, it really is. It's such a smooth bike. It is one of the most comfortable motorcycles that I've ever been on. And I mean, I haven't been on a lot of big old cruisers, but this bike is so smooth. I can totally understand at the time why people wanted to give the V-twin or the parallel twins up from the British bikes, because those bikes are pretty raw. They make a very distinct noise and a very distinct feeling under acceleration, and you gotta rip them out a little bit. But with the 4-cylinder, I mean, I can be under 3,000 RPM and just be having a great, enjoyable time just cruising. With the old British bikes, you don't have, it's not that you have to rev them out like crazy, but you don't have that much power like you do in that smoothness with the 2 extra cylinders. There's a saying that there's no replacement for displacement, and well, you guys tell me. Mixing some of the old gas with some of the new gas, and of course I spilt it on my tank. I need to clean that ASAP. Alright, now we can go back to talking about what this bike is actually like to ride, the feeling that this bike gives you, because I absolutely love riding this motorcycle. As I was saying before, it is one of the smoothest motorcycles I have ever rode in terms of the engine feel. I can pop it down a couple of gears right here, slow down a little bit, 2,500 RPMs, and just cruise in top gear. I mean, this bike will do it, no problem whatsoever. But just opening up a little bit, I don't want to get in too much trouble in the city here. It still has power. I mean, this bike does make, like we said before, 67 horsepower. It's not a ton of power. For the time, it was an incredible amount of power. But even now, this bike is a heavier bike that isn't 100% beginner friendly, but a bike that you can never really get bored of. It's a bike that can keep you entertained with how much power it has. And it's just a fantastic machine to ride. It accelerates so effortlessly. The only thing I would wish, and I wish this of a lot of older motorcycles and even a lot older cars, is an extra gear. Now this bike will do the highway cruising no problem, but it'll be sitting at a pretty high RPM. Not really a big deal, it'll do it, but I don't know, I just always wish that there was an extra gear. The Super Sport, when it came out, was not changed whatsoever. When the CB400 came out, they actually added a 6th gear into the CB400, but they didn't do anything with the 750. They just kept it the same and added a disc brake in the rear. That was the only thing that the Super Sport got. Just to open the bike up a little bit, kind of a weird place to do a pull, but 4,500 RPM.
75 miles per hour. I mean, it's definitely not a slouch. It has plenty of power, and this bike is not tuned correctly. It needs adjusting, and it still pulls more than enough. Now, if you've never hopped on a motorcycle like this before, there is one thing that you notice pretty quickly about the bike. It's the motor. The motor sits in front of you, and you feel all of its weight. I absolutely love the response from the carburetors. 4 individual carburetors. I just scraped the bottom of my stand. 4 individual carburetors for every cylinder. It gives an awesome snappy feel to the bike. This bike is timeless. We're gonna look back on these bikes in another 20-30 years, and well-preserved examples like I intend to do with this bike here are going to look exactly the same. You know, they're not going to look any older than they already do. And in my opinion, these bikes don't even look that old. Like, you could park these bikes, and if it didn't have the big old carburetors, even with the carburetors, I bet you can convince some people that this bike is from the 2000s. It's a timeless design, is what I'm trying to say. Motorcycle companies are trying to replicate this design in their machines nowadays. And in my opinion, I mean, come on. Like, just go buy the old thing. There's just something so intoxicating about riding this motorcycle. It's so smooth. That just vibration noise it makes that can almost put you to sleep. It's just an incredible bike all around. It's just such a good bike. I absolutely adore the CB750. Now, I can understand if some people might say it's a little overrated, or it's not the greatest motorcycle of all time. You know, it's got that name over the course of the last few years. But there's a reason why. But I could never understand if someone said they didn't like these bikes. Or even just appreciate them a little bit, I guess we can say. I can understand if you might not like it, it might not be your style, but you gotta have some appreciation for a bike this iconic. This bike will get you a lot of looks, I'll tell you that. A lot of the older guys are going to be just staring at this bike like, what in the world is that kid riding? Anyways, that's all I have for this video. If you guys enjoyed, like the CB750 as much as I do, make sure to subscribe, leave a like on this video, and as always, I will see you guys in the next video. Thank you guys for watching. Is that a woodchuck?